do feed them after midnight. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Moles and Springs. Game label Gremlin Graphics returns.
Easy money. If you have a copy of Pascal and an Atari Portfolio anyway.
And the hardware doesn't matter. Nintendo's Miyamoto says gamers no longer care about specs.
And pricey prop floppies, along with Doom for the Commodore 64, again, coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 8th of August, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello everyone, I'm Dave and I'm joined today by Chris, say something.
Hello.
And by Jason.
Back at you.
Jason, I have noticed something about your other show. You've now expanded. You've now got a new member and you've got a mailbox. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Tim Gilberts, who's been on the show before, but he decided to become a regular member of our sort of game playing and news reporting rotation, which is the other part. When Retro Adventurers started, the original conceiver, Ben Collier, thought that we should do news. But it's always been tricky with the kind of irregular release schedule for Retro Adventurers to do news in a way that was actually newsy and timely. But maybe because of my year-plus experience of doing a weekly, retro tech news program, I said, well, all right, what's out there? What can we do? So yeah, we do now do a monthly news roundup. We call Open Mailbox, and we try to time that to release in just one of the last day of the month or last couple of days of the month. So Tim's been on that each time around. Usually Nick Moffat's on that one as well. So it's usually anywhere between about 15 minutes to a half hour of mostly old or some neo-retro text adventure news.
Yeah, so Retro Adventurers is the other podcast, the other show that Jason does. He was doing it before he came across here, and it is on text adventures. I love it. And Tim Gilberts is the world-famous icon of text adventures from the I guess the 80s and 90s. His company Gilsoft made the adventure creating software that many people used.
Yep. Quill, and he's been involved in some of the follow-on packages as well.
Yeah. How's your week been, Chris? Have you done any racing?
No, because that challenge is over. I did all right though. I got up to over 20 mil, but now it's Rainbow Island, and I suck at that game, and I hate that game. So. Yeah. You would think if I really loved Bubble Bobble, I would love Rainbow Islands, and I don't. I don't know why. But I play. That's what I like about these challenges is it kind of gives you a focus. You play a game you wouldn't normally play, and you get to grips with it, and hopefully you get a good score at the end. But yeah, it's good fun.
Maybe you'll change your mind. Maybe by the end of it, you'll love Rainbow Islands.
I might. I keep mentioning these challenges, but it's been a while since I've mentioned. So it's Rob from OG Duffy. That's the channel that runs these. So yeah, if you feel like checking him out, he's a nice sort of. He's more a sort of a, let's call him a retro gamer vlogger, lifestyle vlogger. That's kind of, I think, the best way to describe his channel. Yeah.
Okay. Shall we get into the show then?
Yeah.
Quirky characters anchoring in-house intellectual property? Check. Open wheel racing titles? Check. Arcade ports and licensed IP titles of variable quality? Check. Soccer management sims? Also check. Gremlin Graphics, later Gremlin Interactive, checked a lot of these boxes for a game studio / publisher to remain beloved on a retro tech show, right down to the bit where it was acquired by Infogrames in 1999. In that window of time for those few years, there was seemingly mandatory to sell one's video game investments to a French conglomerate. And long after Infogrames put an end to the Gremlin label, the operation is back, more or less, with original founder Ian Stewart, as well as Alan Turvey, who you may know from YouTube and his recent This Week in Retro guest appearances as Happy Coding ZX, calling the shots. Thank you to Robert Crowther for submitting the story published first on Time Extension. If you are a longtime follower of Gremlin games, you will be delighted to know that the previously announced Dreamtime Monty game in the Monty Mole series is still on track for the Spectrum Next system and will now be released under this new and what they are calling a heritage brand of Gremlin Graphics Classics. In the Time Extension article's comments, Turvey chimed in and clarified that, quote, We have the rights to all the classic 8-bit characters, in particular the characters of Monty Mole, Thing on a Spring, Jack the Nipper, Sam Stoat, and quite a few more. And we are aiming at original 8-bit hardware too.
Jason, sorry to interrupt you here, but does all this scream British at you?
Well,
is it all very British?
I'm about to get there, yeah, because if your computer game origins are closer to mine, you may be completely unaware of what a Monty Mole is, how he relates to Potty Pigeon, or how and why a game series would be built around a thing, which is a spring. Because unlike Mastertronic, Gremlin was one of those outfits whose titles only kind of sorta made it across the Atlantic. Most of Gremlin's in-house IP, these beloved alliterative characters, most of them never did, at least not officially. I learned about Jack the Nipper when a illicitly imported copy of the sequel showed up on a BBS, and I very distinctly remember playing this game with a friend of mine, and we're trying to figure out what are we doing, and what is this naudiometer thing? Like, what is even happening? It honestly may have been my first exposure to the slang term nipper for a small child. Like, we were expecting, I don't know, something that would be closer to Jack the Ripper. It was not. There were some Gremlin properties that made it across to North America through publishing agreements with companies like Epix, but some of those titles ended up being renamed. Thing Bounces Back became Coil Cop because the original Thing on a Spring wasn't published here, so marketing something that sounds like a sequel doesn't make sense if you don't sell the original in that market. Games like Alternative World Games became Sports-A-Roni, and those are just a couple of examples of what happened when some Gremlin titles came over here. But Gremlin was a tremendously prolific operation, a lot of different genres represented. And I'm honestly intrigued by the fact that their game, Federation of Free Traders, which was sometimes just, there you go, sometimes just cut down to Federation, their answer to Elite, that came out in 1989. That feels relatively far after the original Elite phenomenon. Maybe they just felt that was where the 16-bit markets had enough volume to keep it going. Back of the box. Dave's got the back of the box showing there. Yep. So for sheer volume and consistency of output, Gremlin, to my eyes, managed the changing tides of video game business till fairly well into the 1990s. They became very well known in some of those you don't need a console to play great platform game circles for the two Zool games. Spreadsheet competition enthusiasts flocked to the Premier Manager series, and even got into RPGs through things like the Hero Quest license. But by the early 2000s, it was all over but the shouting. So yes, I mean, Dave's got all these titles on hand. I was less embroiled in all the details of Gremlin's evolution while they were in business. Did you guys have a favorite era? The 16-bit, 8-bit, 32-bit era? Did you find that they were markedly, better at spotting, quality work in one genre over the others?
They did okay. I mean, Gremlin had, I think, a fairly solid reputation. There were labels that had certainly worse reputations than Gremlin, deservedly so. So I think if you look back at what Gremlin did, they have a lot of bangers in there. But of course, I mean, they were clearly willing to try things that didn't work out quite so well. But I mean, Monty on the Run was one of the first CPC games I got. My family, being frugal Scottish people, would buy compilations, and here we have a Gremlin published compilation of, I think, 2 Gremlin games and 2 non-Gremlin games, Monty on the Run, Bounder, Sweevo's World, and Starquake. But it is Gremlin that published it, and that was the first time I played Monty on the Run. It was a lovely 8-bit game, super, super difficult, and it has that incredibly annoying thing to make it more replayable, whereas there is an escape kit, and you need to select it at the start blind. You need to choose these 3 items, I think it's 3, I'll be corrected if it's not, these items which you will need later on, and you don't know what you need until you need it later on, and it's not always clear if you needed it or not. And I think that would have sold quite a few magazines for hints and tips on that. But they then went on to the 16-bit era, and that's where I think my favourite memories of Gremlin there are. Supercars, absolutely fantastic games. I know that Chris loves his racing games. This isn't really a racing game. It's a top-down. It's kind of like Super Sprint Evolved, where you have a bit of a career and you upgrade your car, and you shoot other cars. You bash them off. They all have a hit point system. That's more my type of game than a behind-the-cockpit racing game. But Gremlin had loads and loads of games. I've actually never played Federation of Free Traders. I bought it because I want to get around to it. And there's other games as well, like Jack the Nipper, no relation to Jack the Ripper, other than they're both probably naughty, I think is fair to say. But I never really worked out what you did with it. It was kind of one of those games where you, school days, that type of thing, some kind of idea of someone's idea of a Spectrum game. But yeah, loads of interesting games. Sorry, I should stop talking.
I am feeling liberated with both of you ripping into Jack the Nipper because I never knew what the heck to do with that game. But I loved it. And I've recently acquired another copy for my Spectrum. And plus, I think it's on the Spectrum as well. Other than I knew there was a pea shooter and that once you got hold of that, you could shoot things. And other than that, I had no clue what the objective was. But yeah, similar to Dave, for Gremlin, it's a 16-bit era. But for me, I like Supercars 2. It is good fun, top-down shooter, top-down driving game with shooting. So I like driving games that include shooting. But it's the Lotus trilogy, 100%. Yeah, that's if somebody says Gremlin, it's that. Partially because in the 8-bit era, I was a bit younger, so I didn't really take note of who the publisher was. I didn't really care, sorry to say. But Auf Wiedersehen Monty, right? So I was heavily addicted to that for ages. So there you go.
And Lotus is the open wheel series, right? Or is that the Lotus Streetcar?
Lotus Turbo Challenge. So yeah. So no, not the open wheel. So Lotus Esprits. And in I think 2, that's when they introduced the Elan. And then in number 3, they also introduced a futuristic, non-existent prototype thing, also Badge Lotus. Yeah.
I think I've just got Peter Sellers from Casino Royale in my head, but I am faster in my Lotus Formula 3.
Yeah, not quite. Maybe it would have been good fun with that, actually.
So via source, who is Alan Turvey himself, Ian Stewart of Gremlin bought back a lot of these classic game rights in 2003, around the time that Infogrames was shutting down the Sheffield operations of what had been the independent Gremlin. More rights purchases followed in the following years, which is why Gremlin Graphics Classics, say that 3 times fast, Gremlin Graphics Classics, that's why they're able to do so much with these titles today. At the time of recording, they do have a website up. There's not a whole heck of a lot there. It's a very Web 1.0 feeling, coming soon. Sign up to get updates, and that also invites you to submit some Gremlin memories. Just before we started recording, and I mean just before we started recording, I did get a little more information from Alan. He just wanted people to know for context that as they are working on sort of expanding the amount of original artwork and archival material out there, that almost all of the original Gremlin artwork was held in storage at Camel Advertising and was sadly destroyed in a flood, to quote him. So another part of what they're doing is recreating and restoring that work to the best of their ability, tracking down the original artists. He says he's already in touch with at least one who will be helping to restore some of that original work. They are hoping to have that Gremlin website showcase everything related to those early years, like a curated online exhibition. And those classic games will be available and playable online. Annotated source code will be coming as a resource, and I guess submitting or soliciting ideas for new spins on those old Gremlin properties, and some tentative plans to bring some of the games to 8-bit console hardware. All sounds very interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Time Extensions report included the note that the label is going to be making a sort of formal debut this October at Crash Live. Stewart will be there representing the brand, along with other Gremlin legends, they say, like Peter Harrop, Tony Crowther, and Sean Hollingworth. So, like, as things go on the getting the band back together, reviving the label, scale, they've had some fairly low lows. I feel like Atari might still be the best example of a game company that manages to have a successful 21st century, kind of navigating changing tastes, armed with a lot of IP, but not necessarily the ton of money or human resources that they had at their peak. Do you guys have a better example of this, where a brand was, really, kind of buried and gone, other than the fandom, and then comes back and makes it into a success?
Atari's a good example. Although 21st century is a bit of a wide thing to say, the last 5 years perhaps. The earlier part of the 20th century is possibly, no, it's not Atari's lowest point, it's one of their lowest points, or several of their lowest points as
There
they
were some
kind of
real
faded
lows.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they faded out and went under, and then they had the whole crypto stuff and the casinos. But they seem to be doing right now. They seem to be doing good stuff now, Atari. So they're a good example. We've got Commodore coming back as well. Commodore didn't do any games, of course, really. They were a hardware thing. And so far, the Commodore 64 Ultimate has been great. The phone, not so sure on. We don't know what's going to happen with Commodore. So they're so very new, it's hard to see how they'll do. There's also Mastertronic kind of coming back, because the Cave Retro Collective have registered Mastertronic as a name now, so they're going to be publishing games soon.
Have they published anything?
Not yet.
Okay,
Not yet. They're building up. I think they're getting close to the point where they will. But I'm quite excited about Gremlin, because there's a whole lot of IP there that they could do things with, and I'm quite pleased with what Alan's been saying about it, because this isn't just a quick how can we cash in on these old brands. They look to be doing things you're talking about restoring the artwork and getting the code up there, annotated and all the rest of it, and allowing people to play the games online. That to me sounds like a loving restoration rather than a cash grab. So I'm pleased to say that's happening. And my request of them is that if you do any more sequels to the games, make them less difficult, please, because I was never any good at them. Supercars is the only one where I think I was really good at.
That's fair enough. I think you're right, Dave. I think Atari is the standout, to answer Jason's question, of a successful re-entry to the market. I think they've done it right eventually. So it'd be interesting to see how Commodore follows suit. Game-wise, actually, bit of housekeeping. Did I accidentally say Lotus Elise before? If I did, I meant a LAN. Of course I meant a LAN. The four-wheel drive, the front-wheel drive soft top. You know the one I mean. Anyway, 4-pot engine.
Let's say we do.
Yeah. But yeah, no, what I would actually like to see from the resurrected Gremlin, if they're open to ideas, and not that they've asked for them, but sure, let's go for it. The Lotus series, the best thing about number one is once you completed it on hard, you could apply for your Lotus driving license. It would be so awesome if people could ring up the new number and get their Lotus license again once they've unlocked the code. That would be friggin' awesome. Just do that. It'll cost you nothing. Because all it was, because I earned mine and it was just an A4 piece of paper printed out with a stupid license thing on it. So there you go. Jack the Nipper, just tell everybody what the hell we're meant to be doing. What I would like, actually, is Supercars 2. I was always a bit disappointed it was a top-down, but there's nothing wrong with that. But what about a version that isn't, that's behind the cars, but you're still racing and shooting?
Cut that out, Duncan.
Why? No, leave it in. Or what I would like to see both from Mastertronic as well and Gremlins and anybody else that resurrects a similar publishing house is what about concentrate on the next gen stuff of the machines that we loved growing up with. So concentrate on, say, a version of, let's do Lotus 4, but aimed at the A1200 AGA optimized. And maybe games for the Mega 65, the C64 Ultra, and the Spectrum Next. That would be a really nice direction to go as well. There you go.
I have remembered there's one we missed out, and it's Thalamus Digital. They've come back and they've been publishing games, and what you get for the money is astonishing. The games are fantastic. Second-Oid and all the rest of it. They've done really, really well, and we shouldn't be missing them out. A much smaller thing than Atari. I mean, they don't compare, they never did, but they're absolutely fantastic, and they haven't put a foot wrong.
Yeah, no, Thalamus is a good one-to-one comparison for what a Gremlin might more or less aspire to be and achieve. Yeah. As I mentioned, I did talk to Alan briefly before this coverage dropped, and he was able to record a quick message for us. So here that is.
Greetings, twirlers, and what a pleasure it is to be back on my favorite podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. Alan here from Gremlin Graphics Classics. It's a little bit surreal just to be saying that, but yeah, it's true. And I'm really looking forward to heading up this project. I think it's going to be great. I'd like to think we're going to do it from the heart as well as from the head. A lot of love is going to go into it, especially with the recovery and restoration and preservation work that we'll be doing with all those great games. But also looking forward to working with developers and creating some new games on old systems with those classic characters. There's quite a nice little roster that we have there to work with, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be back in the UK for Crash Live in mid-October, so I'm sure I'll be meeting a few of you guys then. And who knows, perhaps I'll be back on this podcast someday soon too. Always a pleasure to do that. Okay, guys, keep your eyes peeled. We'll have more news about new projects coming up soon. Take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
And just close with a quote from Time Extension, again from Alan Turvey. It's about passionate communities where people know one another, where creativity comes first, and where projects are driven by enthusiasm rather than deadlines. The people we've chosen to work alongside have already shown that. With a strong and supportive community, small-scale independent ventures can defy expectations and thrive.
We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by Pixel Addict Magazine. Pixel Addict Magazine publish every month, assuming that a month contains 6 weeks. They publish every month, and the current magazine has a very gruff-looking Star Fox on the front because they have an exclusive interview with Star Fox developer Dylan Cuthbert.
You showed a great deal of restraint not jumping straight to the fact that they've got Atari Falcon and Refalcon 030 coverage as well.
Oh. Yeah, so that's coming up as well. Obviously, much more important than anything else is the Atari stuff. But they've got deep dive retrospectives on Blackthorn, Herzog's Vi, stuff about the Goblins collection. The Goblins, that was a neat little game. Anyone remember Goblins with lots of eyes? A puzzle-solving game. Lots more there. The Transformers G1 Hot Rod, I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah,
but
collectible toy, heck yeah. Hot Rod. So he became Rodimus Prime in the movie. How do you not know this? Far out, Dave. Come on.
Lots and lots there in issue 35 of Pixel Addict. If you'd like to get a copy of Pixel Addict, what would you do, Jason?
You'd go to addict.media, get yourself a single issue, get yourself a monthly, we've already been through the definition of monthly, subscription, and you prompt Chris on what he has to say.
Yeah, I just noticed they've also got something on my favourite game, F-16 Combat Pilot, so that looks interesting. I wonder who wrote that article.
Oh, no. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
It's a great one.
Thank you for sponsoring us, Pixel Addict Magazine.
My older brother John took me to the cinema to watch what I still consider to be one of the best sequel movies ever, Terminator 2. It just built so perfectly on the original whilst managing to be lighter viewing and perfectly finishing off the story of the first movie. Well, it did until they cashed in with a third and a fourth, and, well, let's just not talk about any of those. But being into tech at the time, of course, there was this moment when my jaw dropped and I wanted to point at the screen and go, oh my God, that's an Atari Portfolio. I'd seen them in our local shop, Dixon's, and it was a stunning James Bond-like device. A computer in the palm of your hand that flipped out to give you a screen and a keyboard and memory cards. And why do I still want one in 2026 when my phone does infinitely more? Why? Because it's frigging cool. That's why. But it didn't play games. That's what the Atari Lynx is for, right? Anyway, in the film, young John Connor uses a device and a custom ribbon cable attached to a credit card to hack an ATM or cash point for those in the UK and gain, to quote the film, easy money, which of course they take to the Galleria Mall, head to the arcade and spend the lot of it playing Missile Command and Afterburner until the T-1000 shows up. It's the coolest 5-second scene where the Atari spools a heap of numbers and spits out the pin. Well, YouTuber Carrie has recreated this in a great video she recently published. She's watched frame by frame to figure out the pin generator program's list of numbers, as well as the initial prompt screen, and taken great care to recreate it. How? As she details in the video, she used Turbo Pascal and wrote a program distributed onto one of the Atari's programmable memory cards. Well, a modern reproduction card known as the APF-01 memory card. The net result is a pretty much Hollywood-accurate recreation of what we see the Portfolio running in T2. I love it, and you need to watch her video because it's just amazing, and she covers the steps so well. So guys, what other cool uses of tech in movies jumped out at you back then and made you point at the screen and go, oh my God, it's, one of those? Jason?
Well, just to begin at the beginning, like the definitive resource for all of these, or most of these kinds of things, is the website starringthecomputer.com. It goes way, way back. It still has a very Web 1.0 aesthetic, but if you want a pretty good guide to both, I think I remember this in that movie or in this TV show, what was that thing? Or, hey, is my favorite computer featured in anything? It's a good place to cross-reference all of that. I've talked about these instances before, but I'm going to keep going back to it. It's war games, and it's fairly accurate depiction of war dialing, which actually became named after the activity in the movie. That's always going to be a top pick. I think my first ever being able to point and say, oh, that's a thing, that wasn't like the Atari 2600, but for a specific piece of computer equipment. That would be the classic Commodore 1702 monitor, like kind of the de facto Commodore 64 monitor that Chevy Chase uses to watch an old Ronald Reagan movie in the film Spies Like Us. They blotted out the Commodore nameplate, but the distinctive shape is really, really apparent if you've spent a lot of time, several months of your life so far, staring at it, which I had because the film came out not too long after I got my C64 set up. So I spent a lot of time staring at it. I may hold my other one for a bit, but Chris, you do know that it's Kari as in Atari, right? That's even
Kari.
That's her,
sorry,
that's
Kari. Sorry, Kari.
Yeah, she's got a great channel.
Housekeeping.
And she's got a different kind of enthusiasm than we do to it. Yeah, she's really quite hands-on. She's quite clever, and she's made this device. What amused me the most, though, that someone put a comment on her video saying, I bet it doesn't work, as if they're angry that she's designed something that from a film that doesn't actually allow you to put it into an ATM and hack it. Imagine that, eh? Imagine that, it doesn't work.
Maybe that's their humor. Maybe.
We really are so deep into the everybody is a self-appointed dry comedian at this point that you just never know.
I like that Ferris Bueller used a synth that cost many thousands of dollars to do his coughing.
That's a good example, though, because that is a real piece of hardware, and it really did store samples on those floppies.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
They did have a big house and buy cars for their kids, including a Pontiac Fiero. So they had some cash that family.
They did. Oh yeah, no. It was totally believable that he had that synth. It's just that that was a real thing.
And in the film Big, I remember seeing the full-on proper Walkman with the proper foam headphones and clipped to the jeans. That was a really iconic look, that Walkman there. I had my knockoff Boots one that was the cheapest Walkman you could get hold of. Boots the chemist, of course, because where else would you get a Walkman from? A chemist shop in the UK, along with the Zub and Jack the Nipper. I remember those.
And a calculator, you buy everything from Boots, along with your Panadol. A very recent one for me, actually, was spotting an Amiga 2000. Not a recent movie, but I only recently spotted it. So there's an Amiga 2000 in one of the Paranormal Activity movies, and it was an attempt to correctly place a home-based video editing suite in a prequel time period. So I thought that was actually quite well thought out and a nice touch for a franchise that looks like it's thrown together, as POV found footage horror is. So it goes to show there's more to it than just running around screaming when a door closes by itself. Back to Terminator 2, though, I love how Kari not only makes this about the movie and the PIN program, but she also slips in some of the history of the Atari Portfolio, including some of those involved being from Scion, which I didn't know, and it initially being known as the DIP Pocket PC. And as Kari points out in her video, it's possibly the earliest example of actual usable palm-top computing. I'm interested to know, what are your guys' earliest memories of owning or using an actual viable portable computing device? Doesn't necessarily have to be as small as palm top. Dave?
I'm going to cheat here because I don't have a good example. I'm going to cheat and say a handheld computing device. Well.
Oh.
Grandstand Scramble, which maybe, I know Grandstand didn't make it, other people sold it in other places, so it wouldn't be Grandstand Scramble in other places, but in the UK, Grandstand Scramble, a little a mini arcade type game that we all got for our Christmas in the UK in the early 80s before your parents could afford a proper computer for us, before the price dropped down. I loved this. It had coloured LCD. I don't know if it was coloured because it was a monochrome LCD with it probably was. I loved it so much, and I even got as far as to roll the score over to HHH, so the 3 digits display couldn't say what it was. I'd love it if viewers or listeners could let me know if I remember that right. Was it HHH that you got to, if you got that far? But I'd also ask you, please do not tell me that getting HHH was easy. Please don't tell me the game was notorious for everyone getting HHH. Please don't do that. Don't ruin my childhood memories. Let me continue to think I was actually good at one arcade game.
I heard it just came with that on the scoreboard out of the box, Dave. I don't know. Jason?
Yeah, for me, again, Scion 3A, the sleek upscale, and later, in fairness, it was later the alternative to the Atari Portfolio. And I had honestly not heard of the Portfolio at all when T2 came out. So when I'm watching the film, I'm like, oh, okay, Atari's paid for brand placement on a fictional device that's being used. Like, no, real device, real Atari device. That blew me away. And then my other kind of 21st century fun, point at the screen is the VIC-20 used in Flight of the Conchords to show that their management company has no resources. Yeah, Dave.
When did brand placement like that happen for computers? Was that always a thing, do you think?
Oh, well, for computers, I don't know. I mean, like the kickoff of heavy duty, wow, a brand in a movie can really draw eyeballs. That's E.T., because the whole Reese's Pieces thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I know they had it with cigarettes before that.
Well, yeah, it was always more subtle. Like it's not that it had never been done, but the Reese's thing was so like it was a whole story in and of itself, because they had wanted to use M&Ms and the M&M company said no, you can't, and so like it was a story, but also because so many people were emotionally moved by that story, they were finding that it was an uptick for Reese's. The first example of the computer brands themselves, angling for placement in films. I mean, yeah, video games, obviously it's Nintendo's The Wizard, but I don't know for actual computers that we may need to come back to that. Maybe somebody will submit a story, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
Yeah. Wasn't NET the Texas Instruments Speak and Spell? Wasn't that part of the?
Yeah, that was part of the device.
Yeah.
I don't know if TI was in.
It wasn't long before Apple got on top of it, and Apple had all the rules about the bad guys don't use apples and all the rest of it, and all their product placement, and the rumors about that. And I'm not quite sure what's true, but yeah, I wonder how early on it started. Sorry, just a wee thought there. Sorry to derail you.
That's cool. Mine would definitely be the Amstrad Notepad 100%. My brother bought one, same brother that took me just T2. And he just got bored of it, and I kind of just adopted it, which is a nice way to get a new device. And other than filling the RAM trying to write a text adventure in BASIC, I too, inspired by John Connery in T2, wrote a program that looked like it was trying to hack down a PIN code. Well, I tried anyway, and I also tried to write a phone hack tone dialer, and yeah, that didn't work either. And I think that's why this excellent video by Kari really gels with me. She gets it, and like you say, Dave, she's younger than us, but she gets the coolness of such an awesome gadget being used on screen in this way in the context of 1989 tech. So well done, Kari, for this awesome piece of work. Remember, everyone, there's no fate but what we make for ourselves.
I'd like to welcome back Retro and Gaming, who took in another annual membership. If you'd like to join and support our efforts by becoming a patron, becoming an official twirler, where would you go to, Chris?
Sorry, I totally zoned out on the fact that I mispronounced Kari's name right at the start of the story. What are we talking about? Patreon. Patreon.com.
You can just go in.
Yeah, I'll just go. Was it Patreon? Where are
Patreon.com/thisweekinretro. Thank you very much, Chris. We'll not edit that out.
No, keep it in. Keep it in. I'm fine with that.
So totally you do your story, and once you've done your story, you're kind of like, oh, because you've been paying so much for it, and then you kind of, and then you tune out to what someone says afterwards.
And then Dave throws at me every time, just when I'm in that mindset.
I like to do that, though. I like to do that. Have we had any reviews, Jason?
Yeah, there are a couple of new reviews. One from Jay Schneiderman, who, quote, looks forward to this dose of engaging nostalgia every week. And another from Mr. Taylor or MR Taylor. Either way, I'm going to go Mr. Taylor. who calls us Appointment Listening. Started listening to the podcast last year. Looking forward to it every week. Wrapping up with, these guys are great. This is Appointment Listening for me. Subscribe to this! 3 exclamation points. Thank you very much. And meanwhile, on the subreddit, Sir T3 Magic Number pointed out, we don't need to fight. Coleco Adam was the 8-bit home computer that's both a floor wax and a dessert topping. I mistakenly asked my noble lord, the Secretary for Ultima last week, why he referred to ColecoVision expansion module number 3 as the Coleco Adam, a mistake that I made because I thought the term Adam only referred to the standalone computer system. No. The marketing wizards at the Connecticut Leather Company called both products, both the console add-on kit and the full computer package, the Adam, which of course worked out really well for them.
But I don't know enough about them not to be confused when Jason asks me questions about them.
And it's still confusing after you know.
This is where accents are great, because all the way through that conversation last week, I'm going, are they saying Adam or add-on? I don't know what we're talking about.
It was the Adam add-on, yes.
Right.
Yeah. The Atomic Adam add-on.
Adamant. Stand and deliver.
We're pros.
On to using briefs. And top voted submission this week is from Nervous Skunk. What a great username, Nervous Skunk, just about to spray. And it's that Argos are selling a fake floppy disk. Now, they're not selling a floppy disk and claiming it's real. They're selling an imitation, a prop floppy disk of Doom for $19.99. And I think people are slightly annoyed about it, but I don't know. I think I'm okay with it. Nobody's going to buy this and think it's anything other than a bit of a decoration for your house. It tells you that Doom used to come on a floppy disk. It's 20 quid. It's not the most expensive thing in the world. And Doom used to come on a floppy disk, and Doom's such an iconic thing. You can pre-order it now, or if you're young enough, you can buy yourself a save icon.
It's Me Thyroid shared a half-hour interview of Commodore engineering veteran Bill Hurd, which was conducted by Sayaka on Sayaka's Digital Attic YouTube channel. Hurd has told his story in a lot of different forums before. I don't know that this is so much about revelations, but the imagery of why somebody might choose to work for Commodore. You know, it's a computer company whose offices are literally right on top of the chip fab. People, working crunch time, seemingly for love of the game and commitment to what they're doing. That might feel refreshing to hear.
Sad news about French DJ Kavinsky, Vincent Boulanger, who did all sorts of things, including appearing at the closing ceremony of the 2024 Paris Olympics, has passed away. He's famous for making retro-feeling music, modern music that feels like it came from the 80s, and his hit Night Call was the title track for the 2011 movie Drive.
Yeah, retro synthwave and that type of thing.
I love that kind of music.
Doom for the C64. Have we covered this already? Am I going mad, guys? Hell, Mucker 2002 submits a PC Gamer article. Where's my short-term memory go? Did we cover this already? Is this a different one? Jason, help me out here.
I believe
Chris?
This is a different one. Yes.
Is it another one? I want to see Doom for the Atari Portfolio now. That's all I'm interested in.
And Ben One Music started a lively discussion again on physical discs. Talks about the problems with discs themselves. An interesting statistic being claimed is that 27% of all physical games these days require an extra download just to access the core content or fix some game-breaking bugs. And that was an article from Ars Technica.
Yeah, so even just keeping discs isn't enough.
Indigo Prime links us to a Retronaut video showing a wireless interface for your Gotek drive. They, of course, often have a problem where you can't see any screen on them, particularly in wedge machines like the Amiga or the ST. So you have to have a cable. Well, this solves that problem.
And there's loads more in the subreddit, loads and loads more in the subreddit. If you want to go and have a browse through what's there, then go to Reddit, go to the subreddit. Chris, I'm going to ask you, you prepared?
It's reddit.com/r/this week in retro. I'm ready. I did it.
He's back online. He's rebooted. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to everyone that submits. When Shigeru Miyamoto speaks, people tend to make notes. Miyamoto is, of course, Mr. Nintendo, responsible for Mario and Zelda franchises and working at Nintendo since 1977. While he's no longer involved in the daily grind of game development, he still has key roles at Nintendo and is still in charge of their overall direction. He's possibly semi-retired. I don't think it's entirely clear how much he does. but he's still very much involved. So there's really very few people who have been there in the gaming industry as long, never mind achieved as much as Miyamoto has. And what he said now, and thanks to Pajako for submitting the link from Kotaku, is that players no longer care about hardware specs. So before we take this on as a fact, I think it's important to say that hasn't always been right about how things will go. Not every time. He's not been perfect with his predictions. And that for Nintendo, it's been some 20 years at least since they were pushing the high-end hardware. Since their blue ocean strategy of the Wii, they've competed on gameplay and accessibility and interfaces rather than the cutting-edge hardware. In fact, if you look at Nintendo's history, they've done best when they've had lower-cost hardware and got the money in on the games. So what Miyamoto says here is very much aligned with Nintendo vision. So he's not saying that Nintendo should change direction. He's saying everyone else should catch up. So now I've got that caveat in there. Let's talk about what it really means for us, or what I think it means for us in retro. The games that we talk about on here are often what was the bleeding edge of what was possible with technology. Racing games desperately trying to create a sense of speed, of motion, of responsiveness. First-person games trying to immerse you in the action and again get that idea of motion, responsiveness, be it 8-bit games like Mercenary or Driller with 1 or 2 frames a second trying to create a world that still worked even at that low frame rate, or the leaps forward with Ultima Underworld or Doom, or even ports of Pac-Man with clever tricks to get more sprites on the screen, just pushing the edge of the hardware. And these are games we play now. But let's not forget when games suddenly had hard disks to play with, and you had point-and-click adventures suddenly had these beautiful landscapes we could explore. And then with CD-ROM again, we had voice and speech all the way through and all sorts of video stuff and so on. So not all the games we talk about here are cutting-edge games, but lots of them, at least at the time in terms of hardware demands, they were. Many of the games we talk about here were cutting-edge. But here we are later, and whether you think retro just means 8-bit or 16-bit games, or whether you think it goes as far as the PlayStation 3, none of these old games now are pushing the limits of what hardware can do now. Heber have just shown off a handheld device based on Mister with 11 hours of battery life that can comfortably play a PlayStation in FPGA in your hand. 11 hours battery life. Incredible. You can emulate almost anything on a Raspberry Pi. So the games that we played back then that were cutting edge no longer are. And we've seen that retro gaming is more popular than ever. A larger proportion of people aren't as interested overall in the actual hardware. They're interested in just playing the games. Loads of people who have never touched a Super Nintendo play Super Nintendo games on a handheld, a modern handheld, or on an emulator because the games still stand up. Games that didn't care about the specs of the machine now are just a good game. Games like Doom or Super Mario World or Tetris, for example. Doom on the PC pushed things forward. Super Mario showed what the NES could do. Tetris showed what the Game Boy could do. They're great games. And you're not playing those thinking, if only the technology was better, this could be a better experience. They were great as they were. So I'm going to say I agree with them that as time goes on, we're going to see more and more games that age perfectly well. And we should maybe call it classic gaming rather than retro gaming, because retro gaming implies limits and so on and things that aren't necessarily there because the game wasn't limited. So maybe classic gaming is the right word for it. Maybe games like Skyrim, for example, is going to be an evergreen game in the way that Tetris and Super Mario are. What do you think, guys?
Obviously we're talking about retro gaming, but he's talking about the path forward. I think PC gamers do care, and I think they always will care, and it's always a quest to have the newest graphics card and more RAM and blah, blah, blah. I think console gamers care more about the experience than the technology of how it's possible. That may be an assumption on my part. It's a total assumption on my part, but going from my own experience. Hell, I didn't know the Wii was a power PC, right, until we discussed it a few episodes ago. I just knew it was fun, and that's all that mattered. I'm not sure I've ever cared about what's inside a console, except for the OG Xbox, which I'd heard was essentially a consoleized PC. And then I was a little disappointed by how locked down everything was, which we touched on last week. I really thought it could be my all-in-one media device, playing MP3s and everything, and it really couldn't unless you modded it. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, right, as you kind of documented, Dave, it is a very Nintendo on-brand message to say, specs don't matter. People don't care about specs. But I mean, I do think there's something to that, in that I think that there have been times when specs have been comparatively less important, comparatively less differentiated. And I do think that in the short to medium term, we could get there again. Rising hardware prices are going to flatten out the features per dollar you can get. So to your point, Chris, there will always be that market of people that will create demand for, I don't care how much it costs. I absolutely want the latest silicon that's rolling off of the NVIDIA fabs. I want to put it in my machine. I want to say I have the best, the fastest, the most capable video card. But as the market has shifted, as the, call it the inefficiency, like people discovered there was a market inefficiency that you could put all these SSDs and GPUs to more productive use than just selling them into the retail channel. So those have been soaked up. So it may shift for a while to things like, Dave, that battery life example, more to a what can you do that suits your lifestyle and for how long can you do it, than specs like triangles and pixels and operations per second and things like that. So I do think that both can be true. This can absolutely be a core Nintendo message that also is going to be more true than it has been at certain times, like compared to the Athlon and Pentium arms race, where every 2 weeks it seemed like there was another 50 megahertz bump in speed and another 150 you could crank out of it through overclocking, when it really was just we can and we will do faster at very incremental cost. That may be backing off.
Do you think it's in part because basically it's what we've got now technology-wise, it's already good enough, whereas back in the day it was like, oh my God, throw in 3D FX and you've got shadows, you've got lens flares, you've got reflection surfaces and all of that kind of thing. Whereas now, where we don't even stop to look at those things, we just expect them. So why do we need more power? Do you know what I mean? It looks so good already.
I think we're getting diminishing gains, certainly. Back then when 3D FX came in, you had all this extra stuff it did for not very much. Whereas now that we're in, if you look a 3090 compared to a 5090, doesn't really get you very much at all. So that there. But going back to the kind of retro game side of it, I mean, the Game Boy famously won out despite having the weakest hardware of the handhelds you could get. The games, though, I think we're getting games now coming out that will be evergreen forever. And I think we're getting classics now. And I think retro might turn into classic gaming. And we might end up with games coming out now put in the same category as games from the late 80s and the early 90s, which are then seen to be classic gaming. So I think maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, retro might have turned into classic, and that's what my thoughts were on what Miyamoto said. So, not the question of the week this week, our dear listeners and viewers. Which Gremlin film was better between 1 and 2? Just an argument we're having here. Jason and I correctly say that Gremlins 2 was the better film. Chris says that Gremlins 1 was the better film, but we will have a proper question of the week for you after we go back to last week's question of the week, where we asked, what is the most memorable DLC that you've rung up the hotline of shame for, or maybe just paid for?
See what happens, Chris? You disagree with Dave and he steals your bit.
He just stole my bit. I was keen to go in which case I'm going to read out the top answer after I've worked out how I reorder this into the top answer. And the top answer is, according to my screen, Martin C. Retro, who says The Count by Scott Adams, one of 13 additional paid text adventures available for the TI-99 4A and the Adventure Command module. I think I got it in 1982/83. While not a DLC, it was extra content, and technically it is a DLC now. Oh, yeah, good point.
Has that ever passed the eyes of the retro adventurers?
We haven't played the count yet. I had to really think about this for a second because I'm like, what does he mean by these being DLCs? But yes, we talked a little bit last year about the goofy architecture of the TI-99. So the way that it worked, it made it extremely inconvenient to load certain, assembled programs into memory. So you got the Scott Adams system as a cartridge that was essentially the interpreter, and then you loaded in the game files. So that's what the adventure command module, that was the cartridge. And then the games were like, add-on tapes, possibly discs, but I think tapes. So yeah, like that was a deep cut. So
it's almost like an operating system, and then that's the software for it.
Kind of, yeah. Jeff Mendoza says, I'm sorry for the Outrun reference. No, you're not.
Is he? No, he's not.
It's the only time I've paid for DLC, the Outrun 2 map for Sonic All-Stars Racing on the Xbox One. I was trying to get Outrun 2. This was the only thing that came up. I later found out about the licensing shenanigans. I'm sure there's an entire episode of This Week in Retro about that. Glad I kept my Xbox 360 where Outrun 2 still worked.
Ben G. Commend G says, the one that's memorable for me, as it has brought on so much shame and embarrassment as well as buyer's remorse, would be the horse armor for the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Yeah, this is when DLC was new and Bethesda got it spectacularly wrong with a tiny cosmetic upgrade for an incredibly popular game. Is this all we get? Horse armor.
Lots of nice answers on the Reddit this week, including somebody that did have to ring up a hotline of shame, not to get extra strip poker content, but to get help with Lara Croft in a completely different way. So there we go. So thank you for your submissions. Do keep it up because it really is good for engagement for us, and we like to see what you're thinking on the topics we cover. And this week's question of the week is a nice and simple one. What are your favourite Gremlin games? Let us know. Where would they go to do that, Dave?
They would go to our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Gremlins 2.
Well, I guess this company is Gremlins 2, right? Damn it.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
Damn it.
Let's pretend that's what I meant.
Oh, no.
Let's pretend I had some kind of idea behind the brain dribbling out my nose that I had there.
On that note, I'm shaking my head and waving, I think.
Thank you for joining us, folks. We'll see you next week. We're all waving. Bye.
Bye. Gremlins 1.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 The Gamer, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Stiles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.